We're going to go back to where it all started, as described in Genesis, or in Hebrew, Bereshit, meaning in the beginning. There are actually two creation accounts recorded. One is in Genesis chapter 1, and the other is in Genesis chapter 2. Let's consider the Genesis 2 account. And this account is from the perspective of the Creator, and hidden within this story is a parable in wisdom. The very first dialogue with humankind has been through his wisdom and in a parable. You see, a parable contains much deeper knowledge and understanding. We see that the earth is discussed along with the heavens as being completed in their vast array. Notice he mentions heavens. You see, the heavens could be described as realms, dimensions, worlds, but our understanding of these matters is limited to what the Most High reveals. In this account, the Garden of Eden is mentioned as being in the east, or in Hebrew, Kedem, meaning the direction of the rising sun. Now, something to highlight just before we begin is that a number of significant events are noted as occurring in the east, right? Let's take, for example, this is the location where the garden was. It is also the location where the tree of life is, and it's where the cherubim were placed to guard the way to the east. Now, also, many important events are highlighted as occurring in the east. So take, for example, the children of Israel, with the ark symbolizing Elohim's presence, entered the promised land from the east. That is in Josiah chapter 3, verse 1. Also, Ezekiel's vision, the glory, the presence of Jehovah left the corrupted temple, which is the human, and departed to the east. That is Ezekiel chapter 10, verse 4, and I think chapter 18, verse 19. Also, we see that Yeshua's birth was announced in the east. That was in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. And the prophet Isaiah said that the Messiah would come from the wilderness east of Jerusalem. Yeshua ascended into heaven from the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem. That's in Acts chapter 1, verses 6. The Mount of Olives also represents Yeshua's second coming. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4, and Joel chapter 3, verse 2. Now remember, the east is the right side of the human mind, the side that represents righteousness. And we see many cases where the angels always stand on the right and everything occurs on the right. And also the right side of the mind is cognitive thought and creativity. Just some interesting comments. Now, the garden in this story is a metaphor and a representation of paradise, the eternal abode of the righteous. And as I previously mentioned, it is where the tree of life is mentioned. More on this later. We see that Adam, humankind, was created from the earth and brought into the garden and introduced to the angels, and the rules and laws of engagement were discussed. We'll focus on the parable of the garden and the trees in a moment, but first let's get a better understanding as to the heavens and its conflict that has ensued since the creation of this world. In Genesis chapter 1, the world in which the heavens were created is surrounded by a firmament. Let's get some insight from the ascension of Isaiah chapter 7 as to the firmament is discussed. And let's connect Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where we see that there is a deeper story embedded within this. Well, let's pick up from verse 9. And we went up into the firmament, I and he, and there I saw Samael and his hosts, and there was a great struggle in it, and the words of Satan, and they were envying one another. And as above, so also on the earth, for the likeness of what is in the firmament is here on the earth. And I said to the angel, what is this envying? And he said to me, so it has been since the world existed until now, and this struggle will last until the one comes whom you are to see, and he will destroy him. And after this he took me up above the firmament. This is the first heaven. Now, this talks about the ascension of Isaiah, where he is taken up into the different heavens. So he's first taken into the firmament, then he's taken into the first heaven, and he goes all the way to the seventh heaven. But there's a transformation that occurs in him through each stage that he goes through into the next level. He has to be transformed. So what we see is that in the firmament, which is where Samuel and the hosts, the fallen angels, or Satan and his angels reside. This is also confirmed in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12. We are told that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So you see, having an understanding that there are spiritual forces that have rule and dominion over the inhabitants of the earth through hierarchy, and that there is much envy and bickering amongst each other, we can only start to begin to see that as above, so below gives a whole new dimension to this conflict. This is the battle that has been waged on earth since the beginning, and only through obeying the Father's commandments and turning to his laws are we set free from these dominial powers. We are told that the one who comes will destroy his power, and that is the Messiah, Yeshua. You see, even in the ascension of Isaiah, the Most High foretold that the Messiah would come, that he would come down through the heavens and be born into this world, and he would take away the power of Satan and his angels. So this was even foretold in this story before even the Messiah was born. Now that we have touched base on this important message, let's begin to reveal the wisdom that is hidden. You see, the Creator speaks to us through his wisdom and has confirmed his promises by his Son in these last days. You see, wisdom is all about knowledge and understanding. And in this parable alone, he has revealed much wisdom and much understanding by using symbols. You see, a picture paints 1,000 words. And he has encoded in the story the destiny of humanity and provided a means to return to the tree of life, which is wisdom, the true light of the Torah. You see, we all died through hearkening to the tree of knowledge between good and evil, by the seed planted in our minds. You see, our mind is where our counsel, where everything occurs is within our minds. And if the mind is corrupted and defiled, then the world becomes corrupted and defiled. You see, and by the same means we are all saved by wisdom, by the means of Yeshua, who is nailed to a tree, symbolizing paying the price and conquering death. You see, through wisdom, setting the captives free are minds. Now let's talk about the symbolism of the trees. 2 trees were mentioned. The tree of life Adam was directed to. Now the tree of life is the spirit of wisdom. It is the pure light. Nothing corrupt can fall into it. This is why this spirit, the spirit of wisdom, is protected and set apart. And the spirit of wisdom is from heaven. And this is why in Revelations chapter 2 verse 7 it says, "He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit or the Ruach says to the assemblies," which are the people. "To him who overcomes, I'll give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in paradise of Elohim." So this tree of life, to eat, we'll talk about what it means to eat from the tree of life. Now, there was the tree of knowledge between good and evil, which is called the Etz Hadat. So basically, it represents 2 paths a man can take. There is the way of life or the path of death. Now, it also represents 2 angels, the angel of truth and the angel of perversion. And also, good versus evil, divisions. Now, when the Creator spoke these words in Genesis chapter 6 verse 5, it said, "Jehovah saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. You see, here's the thing. They ate from the tree of knowledge between good and evil. And this eating is a metaphor for knowledge. And we'll see that in a moment, that they implanted within their minds. Now we're told that the inclination of the thoughts, which happens in the mind, because everything occurs within the mind and then it manifests in reality. So by having every inclination only evil all the time, basically is the condition of man. And when it talks about the human heart, it means the inner man. So this is what it's really talking about. You see, man hearkened to evil, and through this consumption of evil desires and this knowledge that is embedded in the human mind, the world has become corrupt and defiled. Now in the Hebrew vernacular, this is known as the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. See, even the Creator is illustrating this tendency to incline to evil all the time. And the effect of this would not only be to ourselves, but it would inevitably affect our neighbors and our offspring, the whole entire world. And I'm going to quote something which is very interesting. It's a quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." You see, the world, everything comes within from the mind. And if the mind is defiled and corrupted, then the world and everything around us becomes defiled and corrupted. Now, by describing what occurred using the laws and principles that he founded the world upon, his wisdom, he is able to convey much hidden knowledge and understanding to the simple-minded, those lacking wisdom. Now, the language of wisdom is all about knowledge and understanding, and he is conveying spiritual matters through created things, where if we cannot comprehend the created things, how can we possibly comprehend the spiritual things? You see, Yeshua only spoke by wisdom through parables, the language of life. Symbolically, the garden is representing paradise, the everlasting world. Place, as I've mentioned, is where the tree of life is located, and where Adam and Satan had also been. The gardener in the story is the creator, and his word, the seed, the spirit of life. Trees in the story representing angels, but also us. Now stick with me for a moment and let's explore this together. Pay close attention to my words. At a basic level, we need to have an understanding in cultivation and what is involved in taking care of a garden. We see we need good soil and water. We need, of course, good seed, and sunlight is of the most importance. Now, to maintain a garden involves much labor and care, such as pruning and weed management. You see, these are all vital to the overall growth, the health, and the goodness of the plantation, so that the good fruit is produced. Simply by illustrating and concealing these spiritual matters and these concepts, and by using a tree as representing us and the fruit representing our spirits, he's preserved these truths throughout time memorial. We will see in a moment the deeper aspects of trees. Now, these mysteries are revealed in parables, such as trees and fruits, for instance. They are not literal trees or fruits, but metaphors representing spiritual matters. Now let's consider in your mind that the fruit represents the characteristics of the spirit, and eating is a metaphor of thoughts, reasoning, and knowledge imparted to the people. This is why Yeshua spoke in parables. We're told that Yeshua is Elohim's hidden wisdom. This is in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 24. Now, I said the mind grows with us. You see, by hearkening, listening to his side, Satan, which means the adversary, the angel of death, the perverse mind of all things good, they were deceived and planted within their minds the seed of disobedience and corruption, and as a result left the path of life and entered the path of death. They learned knowledge of evil things. Our minds became corrupted and defiled. You see, the evil seed grew within them. That's why the seed equals thoughts, mind, right? Words. Now, the state of humanity is really described in these two words. There's a Hebrew word called shaka, means corrupt, which really means to destroy, to go ruin, to decay or pervert something. And then there's the word defiled, which is gaal. It means to contaminate, pollute, adulterate or corrupt, desecrate, dishonor, profane, damage purity. And you see, that's what is occurring through this process, is that the mind becomes dysfunctional and causes many problems in this world. You see, why death? You see, Adam was warned that if he consumed this knowledge, he would die, and his mind would die. You see, we're told in 2nd Ezra chapter 4 verse 30, it says, "For a grain of evil seed was sown in Adam's heart from the beginning, and how much ungodliness it has produced until now, and will produce until the time of threshing comes. Consider now for yourself how much fruit of ungodliness a grain of evil seed has produced. When heads of grain without number are sown, how great a threshing floor they will fill." You see, even consistently, the Most High, through wisdom, uses these metaphors. You see, we talk about the grain of evil seed. You see, in the garden, we have the tree, and these thoughts, this seed that was planted, it's in the human heart. And we are told that it has produced much ungodliness, much corruption and defilement. So, and it tells us, consider now for yourself how much fruit of ungodliness a grain of evil seed has produced. So, this is why there is a time limit on mankind to flourish upon the earth. And if man does not change his ways, and if he does not change from this mind to the mind of wisdom, then the end will come, and unfortunately he will not make it into the kingdom. Now, the word lev in Hebrew, meaning soul, mind and spirit, is the Hebrew word. So it's talking about the heart, but it's really talking about the inner mind, the inner human, the spirit and the soul. And we see the fruits of what is being produced in this world when we look around us. And also in Mark chapter 7:21, it talks about this. It talks about from within, out of the heart of man, produce evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. You see, these are the things that man consumed through this knowledge, and it's only produce evil in the world. Ungodliness it is called. And we're told that the soul who sins, and sin is transgression of the eternal law, that soul will die. And that's what it talks about in Ezekiel chapter 18. It says, the soul that sins, it will die. So our choices, we either eat from the tree of life, wisdom, the eternal knowledge and spirit, and have life, or we continue consuming the knowledge of evil. So that is the law of the Most High. And also in Romans chapter 8 verses 6 to 7, it talks about, for the carnally minded is death, but the spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim, for it is not subject to the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed can it be. You see, the mind is what alienates you from the Most High and the eternal promises. See, the product of this has been defilement and corruption. You see, the mindset of the humankind is dead spiritually by default. They don't have the spirit of life in them. That's why you must be born again of the Ruach. Then you are Ikad and one with the spirit of wisdom. and we need to be found worthy to eat from the tree of life, which is the spirit of wisdom and which is eternal. Now, I did say we will discuss the deeper understanding about trees and why from the beginning the Creator has compared us onto trees. What is quite amazing is that there are many similarities between people and trees. Take, for example, both humans and trees are mostly water. We share very similar physical characteristics, and each one of us are completely unique. And humans and trees are interdependent. We breathe in the oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, while the trees take in the carbon dioxide and release the oxygen. So in other words, we share a common destiny with the tree. Also, did you know that the tabular branching pattern of our lungs closely resembles the root system of trees? Now let's talk about trees and how this term is a common metaphor in the English language. Take, for example, the family tree. You see, where relatives in a family are compared to branches of a tree. Now also, trees have roots that not only hold the tree into the ground, but symbolize the beginnings of the tree's growth, just like in the Garden of Eden. Now, the concept of roots is commonly used metaphorically to mean the origin of something. Now, isn't that quite amazing? A tree that has deep roots, or that are being there for a long time, is one that is very old and solidly anchored into the ground. Now, metaphorically, a problem or attitude that is deep-rooted indicates that it is something that goes back many years and is not likely to change anytime soon. Now we look at an example. Take people, their minds and their attitudes or beliefs that they hold dearly. When they are faced with conflicting facts, ideas, or information to the contrary, they are not able to change their minds. They are pretty much just like a deep-rooted tree, very hard to move it. Trees have thousands of leaves. The idea of a leaf is used commonly to describe pages in a book. Now, consider carefully in your minds that all knowledge has been written down and recorded on scrolls, paper since the very beginning, which is, by the way, comes from trees. Now, unfortunately, most, if not all of this knowledge has been based on lies and deception. Imagine what this produces when it is inside the human mind. So this transfer of knowledge has been recorded and written by means of a tree. Trees need light and water to grow effectively. We see that the tree of life provides abundance of light. Before the scrolls, the Torah, came in book form, they were attached to scrolls, which comes from papyrus trees. Now, did you know that the Torah scrolls are called the Eskayim, Hebrew for the tree of life? Now, isn't that amazing? When the tree of life was also in the garden, meaning you have to know where to find it. That's the meaning of the parable. Look and you will find, knock and the door will be open. Now, reflecting on all this, how trees represent us, but also angels, and the fruit thereof a reflection of good and evil characteristics of man. Also, we see that the tree has been the medium to transfer knowledge to mankind. It is through this corrupted and defiled knowledge that our minds were developed. The Creator has also used this means to proclaim His majesty by His wisdom, provided the knowledge of life by the means of the tree of life. We are talking spiritual matters here, of course. Likewise, on Judgment Day, we are told that the books are opened, and we're all judged by the deeds recorded in these books. Of course, these books are not books of this world. Now, that will be a mind-altering day for all of us. I'm sure we all have to face. Now we have the metaphor of good and bad fruits. You see, fruits come from trees. And many fruits that we take, for example, oranges or cherries, lemons, limes, coconuts, grapefruits, all of these fruits are very beautiful to eat, but they all come from a tree. So let's consider some keys to remember. Trees equals humankind and angels. fruit, characteristics of the Spirit, and eat is a metaphor of knowledge and learning and the mind. So you see, just through the tree concept and through this symbolism, the Creator has hidden so much wisdom and knowledge. By just a few words, He can convey very much to us by the Spirit of wisdom. You see, wisdom is so much more deeper than the ocean, or counsels are beyond human comprehension. Once the root of wisdom is planted within you, then you really start to appreciate the depth and the riches of wisdom. Now in Romans chapter 11:33 it talks about the depth of the riches of wisdom and the knowledge of Elohim. It talks about how unsearchable His judgments and His paths beyond tracing out. You see, first of all, you got to understand, it is a depth of riches of understanding. It is so deep that we can't even begin to fathom the height and depth of it. But only through the root of wisdom can you even begin to fathom or comprehend these matters. Now just also consider, just think about upon the works of the Most High upon the earth. He said so much of it is still unknown or not fully understood, right? So it's very, very perplexing. And even scientists are finding out new things every day because His ways are unsearchable because they're so deep. Now, let's think about, let alone the things that are in the heavens, right? Who would know unless they send your Ruach HaKodesh from above, your set-apart spirit from above? So, I want to just visualize the plan of the Most High to try and simplify this in a way that we can see how perfect it is. See, we're told in Proverbs chapter 3 verse 19, Yehovah by wisdom laid the earth's foundations, by understanding He established the heavens. So we see the earth's foundations was built by wisdom. And wisdom is all about knowledge and understanding. Because you can't build something unless you have knowledge and understanding. So when we understand that there is a foundation that is built, and it's so deep. So let's think of that. We see that it all started in the Garden of Eden with two trees. There was a tree of life and there was a tree of knowledge between good and evil. Now the tree of life is wisdom, and just so it started with trees in the garden, it ends with the trees also, and I'll show you that a bit later in a moment. So we're told you see, when Yeshua was speaking through wisdom, see, He was full of the spirit of wisdom, knowledge and understanding, and counsel and power. And when Yeshua said that the whole Torah, the whole law, hangs upon these two commandments. So you see, these two commandments here are like branches on the tree of life. And you see, wisdom, because it has the depth and the riches of understanding, wisdom can see everything from the height to the depth. So it understands that these two commandments here, if we understand these commandments and we're operating under the spirit of wisdom, then these commandments down here will all make sense and they'll all become perfect within us. So let's think about that. We'll start with Deuteronomy chapter 6:5. We read, You shall love Yehovah your Elohim with all your heart, your soul, and your abundance. So you see, loving the Most High is the only way we can understand and even possibly begin to keep these commandments, because if we don't have respect for the Creator and love, right, how will we possibly even begin to, first of all, even understand these commandments and keep them? So that's why wisdom understands that love is the most important thing. Now also Leviticus 19 verse 18 we read, You shall not take vengeance nor bear grudge against the sons of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yehovah your Elohim. Right? So you see, we'll start with these two commandments, but we'll understand that wisdom teaches us in Wisdom chapter 6 verse 18, it says to love her is to keep her laws. To keep her laws is certain of immortality. So you see, this is wisdom's laws. Love is a part of that law. And these two pillars here, all the other commandments just flow down from there, and they're all connected to one another. Now, what's even more remarkable, and it's really profound, is that there are 2 tablets of stone and some people say that the 5 were written on one tablet, 5 in the other, or whether they were just copies of each other. Let's assume for a moment that 5 are the relationship between Elohim and the Benai Elohim, the sons of the Most High, and the other 5 is a relationship between man and man. And we can understand for a moment, if we look at ancient mythology and we see what is written, we can see that we take Babylon and we take Egypt. We see that the Elohim, or the gods, ruled the land. And that's what Egypt was all about. When the Israelites were taken out of Egypt, the first commandment they were given was not to serve other Elohim. So anyway, we see that this is a commandment because the Elohim were told the fallen ones, or the watchers, were upon the earth. And they taught men the things that were upon the heavens, right? So this is what this commandment is really relating to. Now, what was the result of this worship? Well, man fell into idolatry because man started worshiping these gods. And because these gods were removed, they made idols and images to worship them. And through this idolatry today, we can see the mystery schools of Babylon. We can see what has come out of these schools. We just look at the Vatican today, so much idolatry, worship Ishtar and the gods of ancient time. So this has corrupted humanity. Now we also see that, use his name in vain, we see that it talks about the watchers had made oaths in the name, right? So this name is very powerful, and we're told that the earth was founded upon this oath. So you see, first of all, at a very simplistic level, the Most High's name is to be respected and honored. It should not be taken in vain. And of course, the Sabbath day was always an eternal day, and it is always for eternity. So it's a day that we're commanded to cease from our works and to take a rest. And of course, we have honor your father and your mother. You see, we're told that as it is above, so it is below. So we have a heavenly father, but we have a heavenly mother, which is wisdom. She is the tree of life. So you see, we're to honor our father and our mother, but you see, our mother has not been honored. She has been rejected. And just like with mankind, we also have a mother and a father, because the likeness of the things that are in the heavens are upon the earth. And we just look at these commandments here, we can see why these commandments are the building blocks of life. You see, each commandment basically are connected. You see, if man commits adultery, for example, through the breakup of marriages and families, much hatred and discord becomes, and eventually in some cases people commit murder through this act, or likewise somebody kills a loved one, there's vengeance. So by breaking any one of these commandments, we are actually destroying civilization. So these commandments, we need to have the love and the respect of our neighbor, because if we love our neighbor, we will not do these things. That is wisdom, because wisdom understands these things. So anyway, what has been the whole purpose here? Well, it tells us in 2nd Ezra chapter 9 verse 31, it says, "Look, I am sowing my law in you, and it will bear fruit in you." So you see, that's the amazing thing. We all fell and died through hearkening to a tree. Now we are saved by the tree of life, wisdom. And by hearkening and listening to wisdom, we will be saved. Now, just as Yeshua, when he was crucified upon a tree, you see, this was also symbolic of paying that price of death, passing from death into life. Okay, so let's go down here and look at what this fruit is that we are to bear. In Galatians chapter 5:22 we read, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." So you see, if we have this fruit of the Spirit, which is wisdom, which is eternal, because wisdom is from above, we will live with love and joy and peace. And we'll be forgiven of one another, we'll show kindness to one another, we'll show goodness, we'll be faithful, we'll be gentle, and self-control. We've all suffered, we've all failed in certain parts of this, but you see, this is over time, the Most High's work. He will produce this fruit in us because this is eternal. Now, we're told that love is the keeping is to keep our laws, right? So Wisdom chapter 6 verse 18. So let's look at the definition of love as the word describes. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 4-8. It said love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. So you see, it's patient, it's kind, it does not envy one another, it does not boast, and it's not proud. These are all the things that the Most High hates. They're all the spirit of perverseness, or the opposite of these. But these are the spirits of eternity, the fruit of immortality. It does not dishonor others. So you see, we're not actually out to do harm to one another. We're not trying to dishonor one another. And it is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. How many people keep records of wrongs? They do not forgive one another. You see, the Most High forgives us for all our faults, for all our evils. And He does not keep any records of wrongs. But if we keep records of wrongs, then how are we ever going to move on or even understand what wisdom is all about? You see, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. So you see, this is the definition of love. So by understanding and working and living for the spirit of wisdom, we will bear this fruit. Okay? Now, just so it started with the tree of knowledge between good and evil and the tree of life, you see it ends with the tree either what? First, let's read Matthew chapter 7 verse 16. It says, you will recognize them by their fruit. Grapes aren't gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles, are they? No, because grapes come from trees. Fruit comes from trees, right? And just as I said, it started with a tree, it ends with the trees either. Let's read what it says. Matthew chapter 7 verse 19. It says, every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. So you see, wisdom profound. You see, the Most High, His very first dialogue with mankind, described the end from the beginning. But through the symbol of a tree, He was able to provide much wisdom and knowledge. You see, tree is symbolic, and embedded within that tree is so much knowledge. You see, interesting enough, like I just had mentioned previously, you see, all knowledge was written upon paper which came from trees. So truly, knowledge is from the tree. Now, think about that. That's quite a warning there. Every tree that does not produce this fruit, this is the fruit of immortality. He says, is chopped down and thrown into the fire. The Creator said that every matter must be established by the testimony of two witnesses. This has to do with judgment and justice. Let's discuss the identity of these two witnesses that are spoken of in Zechariah 4 and Revelation 11, and who will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. We're told they are the two olive trees and the two lampstands, and that they stand before the Lord of the earth. Revelation 11:4. We see that Revelation is describing these same two witnesses that is spoken of in Zechariah 4. Now in Zechariah 4, we are told the identity of these two olive trees, which is the word of Jehovah. So we're talking about the word here, the word of Jehovah. And the word of Jehovah is what is written and witnessed in the Old and New Covenant. So we're talking about the Torah in the New Covenant. And we're told it's not by power or might, but by my spirit. You see, we're told that the word is spirit, and the word is Elohim, and the word is truth. Now, olive trees, if we think about olive trees, they produce olives, which produce oil that provides the source of the light that lights the 7-branch menorah. These olive trees represent the tree of life. Now, Yeshua told us that the gospel would be preached as a witness, and that the Old Testament was a witness of him. In Matthew 24:14 it says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." And also in John chapter 5:39 it says, "You study the scriptures diligently, because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me." So therefore, these two witnesses are the Torah and the New Covenant. And the lampstands symbolize the light that is provided to mankind, the Spirit of truth, the light of the world. Now, if we take just think about the temple for a moment, the Temple of Solomon, well, we see that the Temple of Solomon was built by wisdom, because the Creator had given wisdom to Solomon. And in the temple there was the 7-lamp candlestick, the gold candlestick. This symbolized the Spirit of wisdom, and the lamps were to be burning all the time continually. See, this temple represents the temple of man. Now we see that Yeshua, when Yeshua had come, it was just before the destruction of the second temple, and Yeshua said, "If you destroy this temple, I will rebuild it in 3 days." He was obviously talking about his body, because you see the temple really is the body where the Spirit of Elohim, his wisdom, resides. Now we're also told in Revelations 1:20, it says, "The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and of the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 assemblies, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 assemblies." In other words, the people are the temple, and it is speaking about us. See, the number 7 is to do with completion and perfection, and it is the number of wisdom. Now, about fire coming out of the mouth of these two witnesses, well, we are told that Elohim's word is like fire in the mouth which can devour. And this is in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 14. "Therefore, this is what Jehovah Elohim of hosts says, because you speak this word, I will make my words in your mouth a fire, and these people the wood it consumes." Now that we have a background on who these two witnesses are, they are the word of Elohim, the testimony of the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. Now, it says that they prophesied for a period of 1,260 days. To get an understanding of this period of time and what it's relating to, we go back into the book of Daniel and the vision of the end of days. You see, Daniel had been shown the end of all things, and he was told that the books were sealed until the time of the end, and we are at that time. And these are the time of the mysteries being revealed. And you see, Daniel saw the end of all things, Judgment Day. He saw the courts were convened and the books were opened. Now, in order to convene in the courts, you need to have witnesses, and this is why these two witnesses are very important. And it talks about this figurative period of time, and it's representative by 1,000, times a half a times, or 1,260 days, or it could be 42 months, or 3.5 years, or even 3.5 days interchangeably. So let's think about this period of time. For example, if you take the 70 weeks of Daniel, in Daniel 9, it equates to 490 literal days, but it's really interpreted as 490 years, right? And this is spoken of the day to a year principle in Numbers chapter 14, verse 34. We read that after the number of the days in which you search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. And also in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, we read, "And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah for 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year." So you see, a day can equal a year. So when we take this period of 1,206 days, it's actually 1,260 years. And we see see that these time periods occur 7 times in the Word. We see they're mentioned twice in Daniel in chapter 7, verse 25, and also in Daniel 12, chapter 7. And also this period of time is mentioned in the book of Revelations. You see, Daniel and the book of Revelations are interconnectedly connected. So in Revelations 11, verse 2 and 11, verse 3, we have these period of times also mentioned. And also in Revelation chapter 6, Revelation 12, verse 14, and Revelation chapter 13, verse 5. So these period of times really occur only in Daniel and the book of Revelation, and it's referring to a time period that we'll discuss in a moment. Now let's look at a point in history where we get a clue as to what period of time Daniel, that this time of these witnesses prophesying, and it's to do with what is spoken of in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25. And it says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time." So we know from history and from the fact that Revelations is being revealed, and we're at the time of the end, that this is speaking about the papacy, the little horn that Daniel was showing, that spoke proud and blasphemous words against the Most High, and changed the times, the laws, and makes wars against the saints. We know also that papacy changed the 10 Commandments, the Sabbath day, from Saturday to Sunday. Okay, so now we can pinpoint this period of time that this witnesses are prophesying for. And if we look at history, this fits in very precisely with the Roman papal power when they ruled from 538 AD to 798 AD. How long for? Exactly 1,260 years, as foretold by Elohim's word. Now, during this time, this power persecuted millions of believers and witnesses to Elohim's word. But Elohim's word was not trampled out completely. Now it says that the 2 witnesses were in sackcloth, representing that he tried to destroy, to wipe out the serpent, Elohim's word, and kill his witnesses, to destroy the light of the world. But he did not succeed. And this is also the same power who made it illegal to own the truth, and the exact same power who oppressed the people, hid the truth, and we're told in her is the blood of the saints. Now in Revelations 11 it says, "For 3.5 days every people, tribe, language, and nation will gaze on their bodies and refuse them burial. And after 3.5 days the breath of life from Elohim entered them, and they stood on their feet." Well, during this time, this dark period of time, so many believers were executed and wiped out from the earth and refused burial because they wanted to eradicate the believers of the Lord. So you see, the bodies of the believers were massacred by the papacy for their faith in Yeshua was for the same period of time, 3.5 days, which is 1,260 years. You see, the dark ages where the light of the gospel truth was suppressed by the power of the serpent. And we're also told that we're told because these 2 prophets had tormented those who lived on the earth, i.e. the rulers and the people who did not want to hear the truth. And those 2 prophets represent Moshe and Yeshua, the word of Elohim. Now we're talking, of course, about Rome, the 4th beast, and the little horn is the papacy. And finally, in Revelations chapter 17, verse 6, we read, "I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of Elohim's set-apart people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Yeshua. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished." So now, to recap, the 2 witnesses are the word of Elohim, the old and new covenants, and Yeshua is the witness of the truth because he is the spirit of truth. And we see that the woman was drunk with the blood of Elohim's people, and it's those people who bore testimony to Yeshua.